as I've shown, supply jurisdiction never applies to society marriages because neither the priest nor the faithful of the Catholic community would believe that a society priest has the habitual faculty to witness marriages. And now we have even more certainty of that, because Francis said the only way that's going to happen is if the bishop either delegates a diocesan clergy to witness the marriage or directly gives the faculty to the SSPX priest himself. In the absence of that, we're back to canonical form, and because they're not valid pastors that have the faculty to witness marriages, the marriages are invalid. You know, this whole notion of the society for decades claiming, you know, that because there are errors in canon law in their subjective assessment, that they somehow have the right to witness marriages. I mean, if you think about, you know, the origin of their claim, you know, they claim that errors in canon law create some kind of necessity because priests are forming these couples who you know, and the priests embrace the error. So what you actually have, Laura, is first of all, you assume that the society is correct to say there are errors in canon law, right? Then you assume that the priests who are informing these couples in marriage programs embrace the errors. Then you assume that these priests are teaching these errors to the couple. Then you assume that the couple embraces the errors, and that they're embracing the errors means they don't understand they're entering into a valid marriage, and hence you can go to the society for their marriages. I mean, it's absurd, right? But their entire pseudo ministry is based upon their subjective claim that Vatican II is heretical, the new mass is evil, and hence they can bypass the divine laws of Jesus Christ and carry out a ministry without any canonical mission or authorization whatsoever. You know, it's pure liberalism, and the consequences are devastating, because if these marriages are invalid, you know, it again raises the question of objective mortal sin. And you know, I would also say, you know, their argument is just self-defeating. I mean, none of their assessments of the code, you know, provide them a faculty to witness marriage. That's just absurd. And what they're really attacking, Laura, is when they look at the code, and you can read what their rationale is. They claim that, you know, I know we're not going to talk specifically about impediments, but they claim that the new ecclesiastical impediments in the new code are ridiculous, and they, you know, that gives doubt to whether these marriages are valid. Well, again, as I said at the beginning, the church has the right to regulate marriage, and in the new code, they introduced a couple of new impediments that didn't exist. You know, lack of discretion, psychological issues, insufficient use of reason, and the like. But you know, in my study, I've gone back well beyond even the 17 code. You can find impediments that dealt with, you know, mental illness and sanity from the decrees of Gratian and Roman fragments of the law under Justinian and Pope Innocent III, and et cetera. So it's almost like they're using, you know, their subjective assessment of errors in the code as a justification to carry out a ministry, just like they do with their entire ministry, right? Vatican II is an error. The new mass is bad. So we have a mission. It's unfortunate, and it's sad, and it's totally un-Catholic.
Well, and as you've mentioned before, the societies set up their own marriage tribunal to decide their, you know, cases concerning their marriages, which is totally out of line. I mean, talk about a parallel church. So they've got that going on. It's like, what are they going off of, the 1917 code then? If the 1980 code is supposedly, you know, deficient, it's like.
Right. I mean, I actually had a case before the St. Charles Borromeo Canonical Commission, as they call it. I have practical experience with dealing with them, and it was the height of absurdity. They couldn't even tell me what laws they were relying upon, whether they actually were relying upon the 17 code or the 83 code, frankly. But you know, it's the greatest sign of, and I'm not saying, you know, everything they do is evil and schismatic, but the greatest sign of schism is that canonical tribunal, because that tribunal is making formal judgments in marriage cases. They're assessing whether there are marriage impediments. They're issuing declarations of nullity, and these are all acts that should be reserved to the local ordinary or the Holy See. So this truly is a usurpation of ecclesiastical authority, which is clearly schismatic. They have no right to do these things. And, you know, they even claim that their judgments are true verdicts and are, you know, in the nature of binding and loosing.
Yeah.
even though their bishops don't have any ordinary jurisdiction to bind or loose. So
Right.
very, very, very problematic.
Okay.
I mean, the availability of a priest under Canon 1116 or a deacon, one who has the authorization to witness a marriage, that has nothing to do with a couple's personal assessment of the orthodoxy of the cleric. Okay,
Yeah.
it doesn't even concern whether they, because once you start assessing the orthodoxy of the minister, Laura, you're really talking about an invisible church here, right? Because you're disregarding proper ecclesiastical authority, and you're boiling it down to whether you subjectively think that this person holds the Catholic faith. But again, that's not relevant to ecclesiastical authority. I mean, you can't make that judgment. It's never been grounds for whether a priest has the faculty or the proper delegation to witness a marriage. And as I said, the Roman Rota has rejected this interpretation as well. And I think it also even underscores the society's error on sacramental theology, which we haven't gotten into much, but we will in the future, where the society believes that the minister must actually totally understand and intend a sacramental effect. This is based on all the teachings of Archbishop Lefebvre on the Eucharist and so forth, but that's not true. The minister simply has to do what the church does. And in this case, he has to witness the marriage, you see. So, they have endeavored to claim that because the marriage is a profession of faith and the modernist priest doesn't have the faith, they can't validly witness marriages. Well, that's insane. I mean, first of all, if anyone is making the profession, it's the couple. It's not the one witnessing.
Right. They're the
marriage.
control of the sacrament. They're the ones that do it. Right.
And, well, and secondly, the Society of St. Pius X rejects the profession of Catholic faith, the profession of 1989. And as I said, this almost renders the church invisible. It's ultimately an error in ecclesiology because they no longer regard the hierarchy as the Catholic Church, but rather only those who they think hold the true Catholic faith, which, as I've said, means they say that the Latin Mass and they reject Vatican II. So it's extremely dangerous.
Right. Oh, man.
It's an act of mercy because the Pope knows these marriages are invalid, just like he knew that their confessions were invalid.
Okay. All right.
But truly, I mean, this is we can say what we want about this Pope, and we all have our concerns, and yet the overtures that he's made with respect to confessions and marriages is more than any other Pope did, since Paul VI, right? So, neither Paul VI nor John Paul II nor Pope Benedict, although he lifted the declared excommunications on the bishops, they weren't given these faculties. Francis has given them faculties for confessions and provisional or conditional faculties for marriages at the discretion of the bishop. So these are extremely positive developments. But again, they underscore the problems that existed prior to them and the fact that the society remains outside the church. And unfortunately, as I said, the attitude of these faculties was quite unfortunate. They said, we don't need them, and we're not, and a lot of them say we're not going to bother with this anyway. So in my view, there still remains this attack on marriage to the extent that the society is disregarding canonical form and putting people in at least objectively a state of sin through invalid marriages.